Hello and welcome to the Sheerah podcast, where we interview Black women who are leading in their field. Our guests range from entrepreneurs to educators.
These leading women are willing to share their experiences and successes, giving back to our community and showcasing so that others can see, learn and lead too.
It can be tough for women and even more so for Black women.
We explore what it takes to rise above the challenges in today's world and be all that you are called to be.
I'm Oge.
And I'm Lisa, and we're your host.
So get ready
and get comfortable as we dive straight in. Welcome to the Sheerah podcast, a special edition for International Women's Day 2022, hosted by Oge Austin-Chukwu and myself, Lisa Leonce. Now this year, the theme is Break the Bias.
We do want to be part of a gender equal world. We want to be a world that is free of bias, stereotypes and discrimination. A world that is diverse, that is equitable and inclusive. A world where difference is valued and celebrated.
Now, Sheerah Network is about empowering people of colour, and the Sheerah podcast interviews leading, inspiring women of colour who are achieving great things in their areas of influence.
The intention of the resources that we put out is to support ethnic minority women leaders in their careers and businesses, sharing their experiences so that other people can learn about their leadership pressures and how they emerged successfully. We try to highlight and celebrate their successes while encouraging others to take their rightful place in every sphere of society.
Now, our guests today are going to introduce themselves. Some you have met already by listening to our podcast, and others you will hear in due course. So, without further ado, my guests, shall we introduce ourselves? Eme, do you want to go first?
Hi, my name is Eme Tony-Uzoebo, and I am the co-founder of EnviroGrow Farms, which produces fresh vegetables and is building a meat processing plant in an abattoir in Nigeria that will actually be the first to hire female butchers in an industry where women are completely excluded. Happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. Yasmin?
Yep, hi, I'm Yasmin, and I am currently sort of doing the mother of three role. I'm in between life stages at the moment. We have just recently finished at our church, and we are in a rest period, ready to go ahead and plant something new and pioneer a new expression where people who don't necessarily feel they belong in a church context can find a place of belonging before they maybe find faith. And I'm also a mentor to young people that are experiencing very difficult circumstances.
Thank you, Yasmin. And Maggie?
Hello, thank you for having me. I am Maggie Ogunbanwo, and I am the founder and CEO at Maggie's An African Twist to Your Everyday Dish. We are an African food brand based in North Wales. We are also, I am a publisher of 3 books now. Our second one is due out this April. It's something to do with food and veganuary and plant-based food. And we are totally, what drives us at Maggie's African Twist is the untying of women's hands. So this is right up our street.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Now, Maya Angelou said, each time a woman stands up for herself, without knowing it possible, without claiming it, she stands up for all women. Now, International Women's Day has been celebrated for years now, and it highlights the struggles and the ills that gender and racial equality that women face and still face. So, Yasmin, can you tell us a little bit about, does International Women's Day still serve a good purpose? And the perception of gender and racial equality within the UK, how that has changed over the years?
Yeah, I think it does. It does still serve a purpose because, first of all, awareness is key. I think long-term change takes a very long time to change. It takes a long time to bring change. And in the area of gender and racial equality, we're trying to steer a ship, so to speak, that has been hundreds and hundreds of years old, steeped in ill heart and in pain and in trauma and in tragedy, really for the greater gain of greed and lust, essentially. And so I think that being aware of history really matters, and initiatives like BLM or with Break the Bias with International Women's Day, I think these do bring these issues to the fore. When the Me Too movement started, suddenly we were open to this huge world. Now we also have to understand we can't see what we just don't see. So I'm mixed race myself. My dad is Pakistani, my mum's English, and my children are my husband's Nigerian. So you then understand the world from a different context as you enter and start to understand these different cultures and just different aspects of life. So I think it's important because it raises awareness. It then causes us to question, okay, on a micro scale, where do I see that in my own life? Where can I be responsible on a day-to-day basis to empower women or to empower people of colour, and to make space and to make room for that? And I think initiatives like this do bring a level of noise, so to speak, bangs the drum. And really, we use those phrases, but actually we do need that noise to keep occurring. We do have to have the conversations. We do have to keep sharing the information. We do have to keep voicing the voices of those who are voiceless and those who have no platform to be able to share the injustices that they face on a day-to-day basis. So I think for me, it's something that I live my life. It's a message for me that I live my life. I choose to live my life that way. So I will quite easily drop things into conversation, and people go, "Oh, I've never thought about it that way." And I think we have to make that normal. We have to make uncomfortable conversations normalized and keep banging the drum, because if if all of these ladies and allies as well, we need allies in men, right? So from the aspect of, for me, in the aspect of racial equality, we need allies in white people. We need allies in the majority group that will say, hang on a minute, this isn't right. The systems and the structures that are in place really need to be changed from the inside out and from the top down. And equally with in gender equality, we need men saying, hang on, look at my team. I know that women can bring value here. I know that diversity of thought really matters, and actually all of the people around my table look like me. And so we do need allies in our male counterparts that really, really are passionately pursuing this aspect.
Yeah, that's great. But do you find that the younger generation, because they have been changes made, do you find that the younger generation, because they don't have that struggle, are not so passionate about it, and they just think it's the norm? Well, I can get that job just because I'm female, why can't I?
I think that the generation kind of like that are coming up, that are in sort of the younger, those that are in the younger age group, say like sort of in their 20s coming out of uni, I feel like they're really passionate about injustice. So they're much more like, no, this is not right, therefore we're not going to allow it to be right. So where people have maybe thought in their hearts, maybe in the generations that are slightly older, or maybe this is a little bit uncomfortable, but I won't say anything. I feel like one of the things that kind of, is it Generation Z, like millennials and those guys, and just, what's the generation underneath millennials? Is it?
I'm not actually sure. It
Z.
keeps changing. No, Z. Thank you.
Yeah. So I feel like those guys are actually, they're pushing change from the bottom up. So where they're starting at this level, they're saying, well, actually, no, this doesn't look diverse in all aspects, really. Not just, I know we're talking about gender and racial equality here, but in all aspects of any form of inequality, I feel like they're actually holding those in the higher levels, at the CEO levels or at the operational level. I feel like they're actually holding them much more to account. So I think in one hand, it's almost a positive thing that they're saying, well, why can't I be paid the same as my male counterpart? I bring as much value. I can probably do the job. I may be able to do the job a little bit more efficiently and just crack on and get the job done. And I think you need those people. I think you need the people that are saying, well, this isn't right, and we're going to be vocal about that. I love with some of the marches and the things that we've seen over this last horrible period of time is actually that is our young people that are leading the way and saying absolutely not on our watch. I've got 3 young children, 10, 8 and 3, and that is encouraging for me as a mother to see that actually by the time they get into the workforce that hopefully things will look very different for them.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I do agree with what you said, Yasmin, about the younger generation being, in many ways, they are very tolerant of difference, but on the other hand, they are intolerant of injustice. So they are the ones who are pushing much more than the older people, I think, for what they believe is right. And because they have that youthful lack of fear and just wanting to say it like it is, I think that certainly in my lifetime, the shifts that I have seen in the last maybe 5 years have been more than the previous 10 to 15 years. So there definitely has been that shift. There is more that we would like to see because we're not yet where we'd like to be. But certainly, I think especially the last 2 years, have been hugely beneficial in moving this whole equality thing forward and in making it a conversation that people have had to have. It's not just a case of I want to have the conversation. People have had to face up to the conversation, painful as it might be, and have had to have it.
Yeah. So what, in your opinion, have been the main drivers for the shift, especially here in the UK?
I feel like people have had enough. I feel like women have just, enough is enough now. Why not? Why you? Why not me? I feel like there's an element of that. And because especially COVID, I think over this last little while has really changed the dynamic of the way that people work. It's shown that people can be productive. I really love this concept of this 4-day working week that is on pilot at the moment. And I know lots of people are saying, I hope they don't ruin it for the rest of us, but actually that level of thinking, okay, well, maybe in that 4 days, they can be 100% productive, and that element of freedom actually does produce, when people feel valued, it does produce results. There's lots of kind of experimental data to prove that. And, where you've seen just the odd company that have said, okay, we're going to scrap holiday allowances, for example, they've seen a higher output in productivity of their workforce. People working from home because of COVID, workforces have seen benefit from that. If you're not spending 3 days, 3 hours a day on your train going into the city or wherever, whatever working life looks like for you, and you get that time back, actually some of that you probably do invest into your working day. So I think personally, from my aspect, I don't know what the other ladies think, but there's an element where people are just saying, okay, this needs to look a little bit different now, and it can look a little bit different. And I think sort of the bigger companies are open to the fact that there's a possibility for work to be done in a different way.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that in addition to the younger people that are coming into the workforce, I think one thing that is also contributing to the shift is breaking the culture of silence. So now people are being more vocal, and then people are calling companies and calling institutions to order and actually outing incidences and things that happen. And I think that holds them to a higher standard and makes them want to kind of either cover it up or explain it to something like that. I also think that with social media and with people being more, it's now easier for things to get reported. And when companies see that it doesn't look good, people are trying to do the right thing, even if they make the right noises and don't follow through. I also think that with brands also, with, again, social media and with information coming out into the public, brands and companies are becoming a bit more conscious of how they look, what they're doing, and what their customers are expecting of them. So I think all of these things are forcing them to at least look like they're having the conversation and make the changes they announce, whether they follow that through. But at least somebody is requiring them, or the society now is requiring them to do more or to talk about doing more. And I think that's a huge step, because as long as things are covered and you don't have specific examples, it's easy for them to come out and say different things. But when people begin to leak or show or publish information that shows that what they say, it's not aligned with what they actually do, it forces them to have the conversation and try to make amends.
Yeah.
I also want to add that I think that people are fed up of being herded, and I think that COVID itself has shown it. People are breaking out of the herd mentality, and I think that as a group, women have followed the herd and followed the leader of the herd. And like you were saying, Yasmin, the young people have found their voice and think, actually, I don't have to go along with this because generations of women have accepted that it's okay. And again, maybe it's got partly to do, Eme, with what you said, because the world is so much smaller now. Where before you were just in your own company or in your own small space, you didn't know what was going on. Now you can find out very easily what goes on in other places. And it doesn't look like what's going on with me. So I'm questioning what's going on with me. So people are speaking, people are, their individual voices are being heard now, literally, and they are refusing to be part of the pack.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And also just to totally agree with that. And I think the other thing is particularly with the younger generation, like the kind of mental and emotional well-being conversation, I think that definitely plays a part. So for example, where people, the older generation's like, well, I go to work and however I'm feeling, whatever I'm thinking, it doesn't matter. I think that element of mental and emotional well-being now plays a part in your working life, particularly for those in the younger generation. So it's almost part of the package that when you're, offered a job, for example, or you're put into the workplace, that, okay, well, how is this role going to benefit my emotional, mental well-being? Am I going to be working, hundreds of hours a week under pressure all the time? Because that's not beneficial for anyone. So I think people are looking for different things as well now, in a role or in the workforce, and just they're looking at teams and saying, okay, well, actually, can I see myself represented? No, I can't. Maybe that's not a space for me to thrive in as well,
We know that the government had a voluntary scheme, a voluntary-led approach for the FTSE 100, 250 and 350, and they had by 2020 to reach a target of making women 33% of their boards. And they did reach that into 2020. However, that was just women. When you break that down further into women of colour, it's obviously much less than a third if a third is women. Now, Oge, you found an article recently that had some more information about those statistics and women of colour in those top positions.
Yes, this article was in the Independent, just hot off the press, actually, because I only saw it this morning. And it was a study that was carried out by the Foresight Society, which is the UK's leading gender equality charity. And they found that women of colour are underrepresented at the highest levels in a vast range of sectors. I mean, we already knew this, but they actually put some numbers in their research. And they discovered that there are some areas that women are wholly absent from senior roles, like the Supreme Court justices, the FTSE 100 chief executives, police and crime commissioners. And not only that, even though the FTSE companies seem to have done some good in making 33% of their boards women, they actually found that when it comes to women of colour, it was only, I believe, 8%. And there were, I'm just trying to find that, yes, 8%. They found that actually women made up only 8% of the FTSE 100 CEOs. But amongst these 8%, none of them was a woman of color, which is quite an indictment. And they went on to say that we are the ones losing because we're not having these women with their skills and everything that they bring to the table. And so the question, I guess, to all of us is, what else? I mean, we've seen this government initiative, which has done some good in making these companies actually count the numbers of women they have and bring these things out into the light. What are the other things that we think should be happening to ensure that there is gender equality, but not just gender equality, but also racial in terms of these top jobs? Because we know that a lot of the policies and the changes that happen are because these people at the top have the voice to bring about those changes. So, ladies, what do you think?
Can I speak to that just briefly from my point of view? Based on untying women's hands, I think that a lot of the work, and people might not think this is fair, but I think that the women of color have to do the work themselves. We have to hear their voices. They have to start speaking out. They have to. I think that some of what holds this community back is where we think of ourselves and how we think of ourselves. And I agree that that is changing, but we said earlier that change takes time. And I think that there's still so many women who do not believe and do not see their capacity and do not understand. And so they're not speaking out. And when people start speaking out, but for example, like Malala, their voices get to be heard. I know you said, okay, that people at the top have the voice, but we're in an age and a time where you can use your voice on social media and your voice can be heard. So I think for me, there are many other reasons, but I think that part of it is that we are not speaking out enough. We are not taking hold enough. Let me give you a story. I am a member of the Food and Drink Industry Wales board, and at a board meeting we were talking about what we talk about, and I pointed out that, do you know what? In time past, when I went for interviews for things, I would get invited to interviews because I would go as Margaret Thompson, and then they would see this Black woman, and you could visibly see this. And most of the people on the board were shocked. In fact, the person who was most shocked was the chairman of the board, who is a white male, and he was not even aware. He spoke to me after. He was not aware. He said, Margaret, is this true? Does this happen? So if people are not aware, we know that some people are aware and are encouraging this, but a lot of people are not aware, and we're the only ones who can make them aware by raising our voices.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking out is a big part to this, isn't it? And also dealing with all the things that we have to deal with the pressures of racial injustice and gender, because we've got both parts to deal with. It plays on that imposter syndrome, doesn't it? Like, when you do get there, that you feel that you don't deserve to be there because everyone's saying you're not there or you're a token, that's why you're there.
Yep.
So it's kind of hard to deal with all of that on all those different emotions.
Yeah. And I think trying to explain that to people can often become tiresome. So I think it's that kind of, it's that a member of my family is in quite high end leadership in terms of recruitment, and she says all the time that depending on the name, it even starts off the paper, like you say, Margaret, you read the name Margaret Thompson and people assume their unconscious bias or their conscious bias is already working overtime straight off the bat of a piece of paper, and then you turn up. And so she works with different levels of leadership and really high end, some of them bespoke firms, but some of them quite big companies. And she often says, we get these sort of requirements and things that they want and they don't want. And sometimes, and she's a woman of color herself, and she said it's astounding that the CVs that often get rejected are the ones, sadly, they just off the bat from their name will not even make it through to the next round. But yet that brings such a level of diversity of thought, as we've talked of today. But people just have to actually undo their formed habits. I think that's a part of it as well. Like with the speaking out, like that gentleman, Margaret, at the beginning of your, the chair of your board had to say, well, hang on a minute, I've never even understood that. And I don't know, what's it like to be in your world? What does that mean? And like those conversations unravel things a bit by bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think also for women of color, when they actually do get into the workplace, sometimes what does happen is no matter how you speak, you look different. You feel different, and the people around you don't, because they are not used to, or they make judgments. And so you are actually even excluded from the social fabric of work. And we all know that when it comes to work and promotions and opportunities, you need people, allies and advocates, people to speak for you. And sometimes you have people who hang out together, and the social aspect of work, if they are already excluded from it, people don't get to know them, to understand them, or to see them as capable. So they may be capable, but because they are not interacting on another level, and even at meetings where they are not there, there's nobody to advocate for them, there's nobody to speak for them. And so when they look around, they don't see many people like themselves. So it makes it even harder, and they believe, I can't go that far. And there's no one there speaking or believing that I can go far. And then when things are happening, they're excluded. So they don't even have the informal ways of advocating for themselves. So I think part of this also contributes to, they get in, but how long do they last? How far do they go? How far do they advance? And what is their career experience?
Yeah.
Are they always fighting? I mean, not fighting, but are they always feeling they have to prove something, or they have to remind people, or they have to educate people? And sometimes they begin to second guess themselves. Is it race? Did this really happen? Or am I overthinking things? And, so even the confidence begins to get impacted.
Yeah.
And Eme, this is true. I totally agree with that. But what comes to mind is the fact that some women fought for us to get the vote. And so there always have to be pioneers. And for us to see change, we have to pioneer. And it seems like in our generation, the pioneering has to begin. And it's never easy to pioneer, but to get to where we want to be, there's some people who have to go through this journey, who have to build up the muscles, who have to become the face of what we're looking for. And then in the future, maybe they will say, I'll use myself, oh, Margaret Ogunbanwo, I listened to her, she inspired me to be what I am today,
Yes. Yeah. And I do agree with everything that you've said. I do agree that the onus is on us, the ones who are the minority, the ones who are overlooked, to step up and rise up. This article was also talking about the very real structural barriers that are there in the workplace that stop women, even as far as in the middle level, because obviously before you get to the top, you go through the middle. So in the middle level management, just looking at the career progression of Black and ethnic minority women is so different from the others. And it's advocating that the onus should not be on these women to fight the battle, if you like, because it would take a much longer time if the onus was on these women to make the way. But the people at the top, like Yasmin, you mentioned the person who is in recruitment. If the people that are recruiting begin to ask those questions, look at their middle level management and see how far is this person progressing? What are the barriers to them going up the ladder? And how can I help to make sure that their career progression is not stopped just because of their color or their gender? And I think these two things have to work in tandem. We, the women, have to do our part, but then the organizations also have to do their part in really being very careful about the data that they're looking at and ensuring that their heart is really in the thing. And it's not just an exercise of, I want to make sure I've got 33%, but, it's just a number to tick, as opposed to we really wanted to change the culture. And we know that culture takes a while to change, but we've got to start somewhere.
Yeah. So, okay, can I just clarify something? Because I agree with that totally too. But if I put myself in the place of the person who's at the top, white person who's at the top, why am I thinking about your issues if you haven't told them to me? Why am I thinking about Black women's issues if they've not been brought to me? So when I say that we have to speak, at least we have to be expressing it to someone. At least we have to go and tell someone. Otherwise, nobody, like I said, the chairman had no idea of my experience. So someone has to tell them of our experiences. And I guess that's the thing. Maybe together we need to speak more and more about our experiences. We need to be shouting out, like you said, Black Lives Matter. The reason people are sitting up and paying attention now is it became a national thing. It became a kind of global thing. So we it's our voices that have to be heard. However, they are our collective voices, let me say, and maybe not always in fighting, but informing.
Yeah.
Love that.
Well, I have to move us on. This is very interesting to talk about, but we've got lots of other things that we want to look at. So one of the reasons that Lisa and I started this podcast was because we really wanted to give voice to Black and ethnic minority women who are achieving remarkable things. They're not always in the news. The media doesn't always highlight them. So we wanted to highlight these women and give them a space where they can talk about their experiences and other people can learn from their experiences. So tell me, Eme, how important is it to have role models that you can see and aspire to be like when you're developing leaders? And how has having good role models impacted you in your leadership journey?
So personally, when I left the corporate world to become an entrepreneur, I didn't see many Black female entrepreneurs. And when you can't see something, sometimes it's harder to aspire to be that thing or to think that it's feasible for you. Also, seeing different Black women leaders doing great things broadens your definition of great things and helps you to recognize that there are different pathways and different possibilities. So I believe that role models are effective to encourage women to make different choices, to inspire us to do things because we see that others are doing it and we see it's possible. And when we see Black women in roles, it's easier for us to imagine ourselves in those roles. And it's easier for more women to put themselves forward because they've seen people who are doing it and who are, who are successful there. I also think having women leaders as role models is good for men to see that women can be good leaders too. Because if men can't see women being good leaders, some of them may say, oh, if women are good leaders, why are we not seeing more of them? But when men see more women leaders, they would recognize it's possible, they would advocate for them, and they will put them there. I also think when it comes, because women, there are many dimensions to being a woman. And I see that when having good women, Black or ethnic minority women leaders, it enables parents and peers around you to see different possibilities. Because as women, sometimes we are held back by a lot of things. Sometimes women are discouraged by others, by family, by friends from following a particular track, by telling you it's very difficult, you will not be successful, women are not good in this and all of that. So rather than women getting encouragement to follow their paths, they get discouragement. So I think seeing more women role models, ethnic women role models, will help even family, peers, friends, people to support women and believe that, yes, you're doing something that women typically don't do, but you can do it and not discourage you. So for me, when I didn't see a lot of Black ethnic minority women entrepreneurs, it made me question my choices. It made me question, is this possible? Is this the right thing to do? And it magnified for me the risks and made me over anxious and also concerned about the trade-offs, because I wasn't seeing many people who were doing it. And I was wondering, maybe it's not even possible, or maybe the journey is so hard that at the end of the day, a lot of them don't make it through. So for me personally, I believe that seeing a lot more people ahead of you encourages you, and it makes you believe that you can choose a different path. And when you see more diversity in what people are doing, it doesn't have to be one path, but seeing different possibilities makes you you choose your own path and be confident that you can execute on your own path and have the impact that you want to have.
So Maggie, what options do you think women who find themselves facing discrimination based on gender or race, what options do they have?
This is a really good question. I think that the first option is that women need to remember that they have a voice. I'm going on about this, but a voice is not only me speaking out. A voice is social media. A voice is using all the tools that we have. I think that people need to speak up more. I think that in the past, when people have faced gender discrimination in the workplace, they've kept quiet about it. It's been it's been what happened. So it's been accepted. I think that the other thing is that, like Eme was saying, you know, role models, they're not too many, but finding them and going to share their experiences is also another option, because that person may be the voice for you. I think that media is and I talked about social media, but I'm now talking about media is a good option, because people are more aware that Black Lives Matter. You have an issue, if you're brave enough, you take it to the media and let your voice be heard. Let us stop covering what is going on. So yeah, for me, those are three really great ways that people can. Yeah, these are options that people have, as opposed to a time when we felt we had no option, so we kept quiet. We didn't talk about it. We didn't uncover it. It's time to uncover whatever is going on. It's time to speak about in whatever way that you can do that.
Mm. Yeah. Yasmin, were you going to say something, Yasmin?
No, I was just going to say, to Eme's point earlier, I think that thing about visualization and that element of, you know, there's two things, isn't there? You become what you see, or you can't become what you don't see. And it's figuring out, like, what are we going to do for the next generation? Or as Eme said, as she took that transition and decided to change what she wanted to do, either you just decide to pioneer it, as we've talked about earlier, and say, actually, I could be that person for somebody else if I didn't see that for myself. And we often talk about that with our children, that we talk about the fact that, you know, if there's something they want to do, my son wants to be an author. So it's very slowly are we seeing now that percentage of diverse authors increase. You know, there's much more on the market than, say, probably when he was 5, just, you know, sort of 5 years ago now. And it's really important that children are able to see themselves represented in books, right? So he wants to be able to do that, and he can read stories where he feels like he is in the story because he's represented well. So I think that thing about representation really makes a big difference. And just this week I was having a conversation with someone about just sort of our life stage and where we're at and our hopes and dreams, and they were sort of reassured me, actually, like, I've done that journey, I've been a person of colour on that journey, and where you're at, and it's really normal. And it just helped for me to be able to speak to someone who understood who we were in our holistic sense, because I think sometimes you know, there's an element where, not with all, but I just think there's an element with some, I suppose, a lot of white people that you come around, that there's such a part of your life that they don't understand in terms of the difficulties that you face on a day-to-day basis, the way that you have to conduct yourself, how you have to get yourself in the zone and think about who you are and your body language and the way that you talk on a daily basis, that to then explain that first and then to think about becoming this thing is a difficult concept. So for me this week, we were really encouraged as a family, because I was able to say, oh, okay, you get it in its entirety. And actually now that helps me to be able to say, okay, well, I can do this. And then those that are coming behind me are able to then go, oh, well, she did it, and she's made a gateway, she's made a pathway in order for us to do it too. And I feel like, particularly on our family, one of those things that we have is that pioneering thing. So it often can weigh heavy to become that, you know, to do that journey. But it's having that heart of thinking, okay, those coming behind me, it will be a little bit less difficult for, and, you know.
I mean, all of us on the call have actually got children, but I know that's not the case for all women. But what is your greatest desire to have the culture and the environment for your children to then grow up in? I mean, you alluded to some of it, but if you could have an ideal culture and environment for your children, what would that look like?
I think for me personally, where I could see that it's truly limitless. We teach our children very much you can be what you want to be. We've taught them about the world that they will grow up in. We've been very honest, particularly with our older two children, about the things that they will face. We live in a very white middle class area here, so they're already in a minority in their schools. And so I feel like one of the things that I really want them to know wholeheartedly is that they can be anything, but also not only have we sort of taught them and nurtured them that at home, that actually when they go out into the spheres that they will go into, that they will truly be able to see that they would look and say, oh, I can see that I can be anything because that person there looks like me. And, you know, we are seeing that very slowly in media, in films, in TV. You know, we'll watch Friday night is film night in our house, and we often will watch things. And even my 3-year-old the other day, we watched a film and she said, look, they look like me. And I thought, how amazing, even at 3 years old, that she could identify that. And that's why it starts from so very young. But I feel like one of the things that we've, I suppose, imparted and do impart into others is that the equality thing between men and women in our home. We don't let our son cut off our daughters when they're talking, and they sound like sort of silly things, but actually as he grows, he will be an advocate for women in the workplace because we've drummed that into him. So we and our girls will have a level of assurance that actually, no, sorry, you don't just brush over me. I'm, you know. So I feel like for me, my greatest desire is that particularly my brown girls, particularly my girls, that they would really know and be assured of themselves that they can truly become what they want to be.
As I hear you, Yasmin, for me, particularly my daughter, I have a boy and a girl, and my daughter is always going to, well, I don't want to use the word feminist, but she's always going equality. My son, she wants the rules to be the same for both of them, and she's always questioning and challenging everything using the gender lens. For me, the culture I want for her particularly is a culture that encourages her to take risks. Because I feel that a lot of women, or the culture around a lot of Black women, doesn't support or encourage women to take risks. So they are kind of socialized or encouraged to take the safe path, to take the path that is predictable, while the men are encouraged to risk it and, you know, try and dare to do different things. So I want for her to be able to take risks, to have dreams, and to be encouraged to follow those dreams, you know, to make the choices that suit her. I also want her a culture where she recognizes that her dreams are valid and she does not have to lay them down for somebody else's dreams. Because again, sometimes as women, because of the different roles we play, that comes and different life phases we go through, sometimes there's an expectation that women should set down their dreams, their visions, and support others. And we're not always, you find women getting into this role where they're supporting, encouraging others. But I want my daughter to know that her dreams, her choices are valid, and it is not second class to any other. So she does not have to be the one that lays them down anytime a sacrifice is required. For me, because I always say to her, what I've invested or what you've invested in your education is the same as my son, what we've invested in his and what he has invested in, so that none of them is more important than the other. So I want her to always, at the back of her mind, recognize that a man's dreams and his passions and his, you know, career, whatever, is not more important than hers. Right. And she should not lay down hers to support someone else's. I mean, you know, of course, negotiation is something that women in the past haven't been able to do very well. And as you go through different phases in life, I would want her to recognize that negotiation, you know, you don't lay down in your whatever you want, you know, for others to get ahead. So you need to be able to advocate for yourself. You need to be able to negotiate and recognize that you have a good chance as anybody else. And so you shouldn't have to be the one always sacrificing. And I hope that the culture will support her choices. And no matter if the choices are very different from what they expect a woman's choices to be, the culture that supports her and recognizes those choices as valid because they are hers.
Love that.
And for me, I put it in very simple ways. I agree with what the ladies have said, but I want my children to hold on to their values, but to always question the construct, is how I put it, to question the culture, to question why things are done that way. And if it doesn't align with their values, then they don't need to follow it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can remember many, many years ago, the first thing that my son said, I think he was probably only about 3 or 4 when we first went to Nigeria with them. The first thing he said when he got to the airport was, "Mummy, they're all brown." And you could see the glee on his face, because we had been living in a predominantly white area. They were the only 2 brown kids or black kids in their school, with one other family in a school of, I don't know how many hundreds there were. And when I saw the look on his face, it was almost like I didn't think I could see so many people that looked like me. And that really caught my heart. And it's something that I have never forgotten. But they live in a world where they are the minority. This is where they've been born. This is where they're going to be brought up. But that doesn't mean that they grow up feeling any less value than anybody else. And that's the culture that I want to see. That's what keeps me going. That's what makes me do things like this, is if I can leave the world in a better place for my children, if they can stand up and know that they are valued, they're appreciated, and that they are not less intelligent than anybody else because of their color or their gender, that would have been for me a job well done. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. And that's something that I want us to think about, is what is the legacy that you want to pass on?
I think, honestly, it's like a combination of everything that we've said here, that we've discussed. I think for a woman to really be able to recognize that her dreams and visions, Eme, I love what you said, are valid, I think is a pretty big thing to, hand on. And absolutely, like what we've all said, that thing of passing on the baton, with it being better, richer, more equitable, more equality, more diverse, and understanding of diversity of thought. And I think also, for me particularly, because sort of a lot of my world is wrapped up in that, I think in element of faith. So whatever faith, for people that do have faith, whether that's Christian, Muslim, Hindu, whatever your faith may be, I feel like there's a lot of work to be done in faith constructs in terms of women's equity and equality. And I feel like the church, because that's my understanding at this kind of, is getting better, but we've still got a long way to go. But I think in other faiths, there's still a very, very long way to go. I grew up as a Muslim, and I came to faith a bit later, to my Christian faith in my journey. But I think that's a whole world that we're obviously today talking predominantly about sort of career and the corporate world or entrepreneurship, but I think there's a whole world in the faith dynamic that legacy for me, I would really want to see women just burst forth with their vision and their beauty and their understanding of their God and how they lead in those areas. For me, that is something I would just love to see. And I think it can bring something beautiful. I was listening to something the other day that he talks about actually those who are mothers often are some of the best employees because actually they work hard, they can multitask, they're smart, there's so much there's so many transferable skills, and yet there's so many things against them really entering into the workplace depending on their scenario. But I think that the legacy to be able to actually wake up, to be able to dream and to live out what they feel maybe their life purpose is or what their dreams and visions are, and to look back and say, actually, I did that, we did that. But to hand on the baton where those actually some of the things that we're even talking about today, I would love to see them not even, they would just walk into it, because, you know, like you said, Maggie, about women fought for us to have the vote, right? So now we vote because people did that on our behalf. And so actually the generations that are ahead, for our younger people to be able to say, actually, I want you to walk into it. I want my daughter to walk into a boardroom and be an absolute boss and not be called domineering or, you know, assertive, you know, all of those things that women struggle with on a day-to-day basis, to be able to walk in and have her voice valued and appreciated and heard. That for me would be a big part of it.
It's pretty short. I want my daughter, I want women, I want girls of color to go and to live their best lives. Yeah. And we're all different. And so, and until the world and the culture and the construct squeezes it out, there is something in everybody. And I want, the legacy I want to leave is that you look at my life and think, ooh, she chased her best life. I'm going to chase my best life.
Love that. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, I think I want, in addition to what Yasmin has said and what Maggie has said, I want my children and my daughters to have confidence, because many times being a minority and always looking around and having people either not notice you or telling you how you have to live can affect your confidence and your voice. I want them to have the confidence that they are good enough. I want them to have the confidence that they can live any life they want to. And I want them to recognize that they have a voice which is valid and which they can use. I don't want them to ever be cowed into thinking that I can't use my voice, or that using my voice will work against me. So I want them to have the confidence to use their voice and to really go out there and live the lives that they want to live, and not the lives that culture and society has defined for them. I come from a part of the world that is quite patriarchal, where there are set rules. And Yasmin, like you mentioned, unfortunately, in many aspects of life, so traditionally in the corporate world, in faith also, there are so many rules for women and the ways that they have been defined for women. So I wish that my children will always question culture and tradition. There was a quote I saw somewhere that said, tradition is peer pressure from dead people. And I totally believe that.
That's so good.
Yes, peer pressure from dead people. Every time back in Nigeria, they say it's tradition, and they use that to shut down any dissent or any questioning. And I'm like, yeah, dead people. And I'm telling you, years after they've died, how to live, what your roles are, what your dreams are. So I want my children to always question tradition and culture, and not accept it that because our forefathers or because the culture around says this is, does it work for me? Does it serve me? But more importantly, I tell them, is it equitable? Is there justice? So it's not just this is a culture or the tradition. Is it fair? And if it's not fair, if it's not equitable, you discard it. If it doesn't serve you, there's nothing like culture, or there's nothing like tradition.
So Eme, sorry, ladies, I'll just say this. Eme, I want to make you laugh because I'm in your country where you come from. And almost as I step in your country, there's one thing that I come across. There's my husband and I, and it's good afternoon, sir. And I'm like,
they ignore
what
you.
About me? So I have to tell you that I'm representing here. As soon as they ignore me, I first turn, give them a stare and say, oh, I don't need to be greeted. Ma doesn't need to be greeted. So there you go. I just thought I'd share that one.
They literally ignore you like you do not exist.
This was supposed to be a laugh, Eme.
They have a long way to go in that part of the world. There's a very long way to go, for women especially.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Don't get me started on that.
Oh, so
yeah. So Lisa, do you want to say something about your legacy?
Yeah, well, it's a combination of all of you guys, what have you just said here, but mine is simplified in terms of leaving the world in a better place than it was when I leave, and that continues for them. So whatever that is, just leaving it in a better position than it was before. Yeah. And that's a combination of everything that you've just said, all of you.
Yeah. One of the things we touched on, but we didn't really talk in detail about, is this thing about women, not just Black and ethnic minority women, but just women in general, not being reluctant to put themselves forward for leadership positions. Mm. And also finding themselves, and maybe some of the reasons is because they cannot cope with the caustic environment that you often find yourself in, and the criticism field. I mean, when you just look at the news, the way that the media criticizes, particularly women leaders, and criticizes them about things that have nothing to do with the issues. So maybe criticizing their clothes or the way they speak, some things that have absolutely nothing to do with the issue. So one of the things I would like to leave with my daughter and any other young people that I'm involved in is the confidence to put themselves forward. Because sometimes we wait to be asked to do something. We wait for somebody else to affirm us. And a lot of times that isn't going to come. So to get to the place where they are so confident about their gifts and their skills and their purpose for life, that if nobody's opening the door for them, they jolly well push that door open and look back and think, so let me see who's going to stop me. Mm-hmm. That sort of, attitude. That's what I would like to instill in my daughter and any girls that I work with, because I have recognized that sometimes in this world, you have got to fight, like we've all talked about. And I would love it if things came to me easily. I'd absolutely love it. But I find that sometimes the things that are worth having, you do have to fight for them. So that's the kind of legacy I would want to leave for my daughter. Thank you all for your part in this very exciting conversation. It just doesn't seem like 1 hour is enough to talk about these things. But thank you and all our guests, and thank you, our listeners, for listening. And do remember to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode, because we have all these lovely ladies and individual interviews themselves. And we hope to continue to showcase women, Black women and other ethnic minority women who are really doing the hard grind and making a way for others.
Yes, a special thank you to our guests today, and you will find their contact details in the description below, so you can find out how you can contact them direct and their organisations. But let's continue to celebrate women and their achievements. Let's continue to raise awareness against biases and take action for equality, and together we can forge women's equality. So all that's left to say is Happy International Women's Day.